great nations, first, before becoming great, they are someone's dream. They're always dreamers, poets maybe, but idealists who dream of big things. And so therefore, first there's this dream, and then the nation, if it's lucky, gets close to the dream. If the politicians make the right noises and talk about friendship, then cricket acts as a cement. It helps. But if the politicians are talking about war, then the cricket field becomes like a war.
You became Prime Minister 2018. The first speech you gave, you sent a message to India, to Prime Minister Modi, that if you take one step towards us, we'll take 2 steps towards you. But the fallout or the unfolding of the last 2 years shows that there's going to be a perpetual conflict between India and Pakistan. Is that how you see the relations between the two neighbors?
You see, I do not believe in military solutions. I do not believe that matters should be fixed by military action. Because you use military action to solve one problem and you create a host of other problems. Unintended consequences of military actions. So, I tried my best to have relationship with India which were of civilized neighbors. I know India better than others. I know most of Indians, who I know do not think like Narendra Modi.
I first met prominent Indian author and politician Shashi Tharoor back in 2001 when he was working at the United Nations. Shashi has just written a book titled The Battle of Belonging.
My argument against the Hindutva movement in India is very often linked to the fact that they seem to have a chip on their shoulder about the past. And I'm saying, look, let's move on. We've got to look at the future. And I too, I think, as many young Pakistanis would rather think about how to create decent conditions of life and prosperity, better opportunities for our families and our children, the kind of essential needs for food, education, and advancement that every human being ultimately desires for themselves and their children. That's what Pakistanis want, that's what Indians want, that's what everyone wants.
Following a very bloody and turbulent partition in 1947, both Pakistan and India have suffered from decades of violent extremism and unresolved conflict. There have been 3 wars, multiple political assassinations, including that of Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi.
Gandhi, who gave his life because he wanted Muslims also to have rights. So we know that he never used any symbol, religious or secular, to divide Hindus from Muslims. He was committed to Hindu-Muslim brotherhood. To a large extent he succeeded, to a significant extent he failed. Why did he fail? Because the Hindu extremists also continuing to mount their campaign. They presented Gandhi as some kind of appeaser of Muslims. In fact, they called him a half-Muslim.
South Asia is seen by many as an epicenter of terrorism and ethno-religious violence. With both nations armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, the doomsday clock has moved closer to midnight.
To me, that's the basis of democracy. It's the inherent dignity of the individual. The individual is the one the government serves. The government serves that individual, not the other way around. And that's why I've looked so much at religious freedom as being just this bedrock piece that we've got to figure out. And countries have to practice that, because if you can get this one right, the other human rights tend to flourish around it, because this one's really pretty tough. There's religious nationalism, there's ethnic, often division that also has a religious tinge to it. There's manipulation of religions by politicians. There's all sorts of things. That's why I really think we've got to get countries to push this one and say, okay, we're committed to religious freedom for everybody, everywhere, all the time, of people that peacefully practice their faith, even if you don't agree with it.
People do carry away by these, heady concepts of racial superiority, that Hindu superiority. People, if you appeal to people's nationalism, human beings get carried away. And a lot of people like Narendra Modi have, we had Altaf Hussain in Karachi who was doing the same with Urdu-speaking people. Firstly, you raise that nationalistic feeling, fervor in a people, and then you transfer hate on some other human community. So like Hitler blamed the Jews for all the problems of Germany. Altaf Hussain blamed all the other ethnic people living in Karachi for the problems of Karachi. And similarly, Narendra Modi has blamed Muslims for the problems India faces, and to a lesser extent, the Christians.
Today, you're looking at a situation where the Muslim community has been ghettoized. You're looking at people being lynched on the streets. You're looking at them being pushed out of economic activity they participated in earlier. Meat shops, leather work, handicrafts. All of this is under assault. The violence in India is terrifying. I mean, you all must have followed the rape of the little girl in Kashmir. I mean, the New York Times did a story with school textbooks of great world leaders with Hitler on the cover. You have 4 Supreme Court judges who came out, the senior most judges below the Chief Justice, who came out. It's never happened in India. They came out and held a press conference and said democracy is in danger.
So this is a very dangerous ideology. It always leads to bloodshed.
We have to salvage religion from the fanatics, from the extremists, from the fundamentalists who don't want people to love each other. They want people to hate each other.
You look at the massacres in Rwanda, in Bosnia, always you had someone standing up and thinking we are superior and all problems are because of some other human community. And so I did not realize in the beginning that he was actually an ideologue who believes in racial superiority and who believes that the Muslims should be second, and other minorities in India should be second-class citizens. So when I realized that, and especially when he passed that law in Kashmir and basically put the Kashmiris on 5th August 2019 in an open prison with these soldiers in the valley, then I realized what we were up against. And when he bombed us here and that whole Pulwama incident. So it's very unfortunate. But a bigger tragedy is what is happening to India. More than our neighbors, I mean, yes, he's a threat to everyone. But actually what is happening in India, remember, what he's doing basically is what has never been done in history. Almost 500 million human beings in India will become second-class citizens because of what his course of action. Because of this Hindu superior ideology, Hindutva. And I think India will no longer be the sort of secular democracy which envisaged by Gandhi and Nehru.
ये कौन सी देश की बात कर रहे हो डेमोक्रेसी? या मतलब कौन से देश की बात कर रहे हो? इंडिया की बात कर रहे हो? इंडिया में कोई डेमोक्रेसी नहीं है. डेमोक्रेसी इंडिया में ये मतलब आपके इमेजिनेशन में हो सकती है, मगर रियलिटी में है नहीं. मैं वार्निंग दे रहा हूँ कि आप देखिए क्या हो रहा है. नरेंद्र मोदी हिंदुस्तान को कमजोर कर रहा है. आप अपने सिस्टम को तोड़ रहे हो. आप अपने लोगों को लड़ा रहे हो.
हाँ
just before September 11th, 1948, he made a speech. You are free to go to your mosques, your temples, your gurdwaras, your churches. That has nothing to do with the business of state. How do you react to that?
First of all, Quaid-e-Azam had one of the best minds I can think of. I don't think hardly any politician had that sort of brilliance as Quaid-e-Azam. And that's reflected not only, if you read his speeches, every speech was just so well articulated, and it had so much substance. And his brilliance is also reflected that he was above communal thinking. So that's why he was considered an ambassador for Hindu-Muslim unity.
When Gandhi came from South Africa, my father was already an established politician.
What would they have had in common which would have led them to understand each other?
Well, I think the original thing that was in common was how to get the British out. I mean, how to get India independent.
He quickly realized that basically what even the Congress at the time wanted was not independence for everyone. It was they wanted a Hindu India, which is what has happened right now. So he was way ahead of his time. And when he parted ways, he realized this. And he was deeply shocked by this. Because at that time, the Muslims did not realize. They were all scattered. Muslim League was a non-entity. And he was the one who realized that they were in grave danger of becoming from the slavery of British. They would now become slaves of Hindus. Or, in other words, not equal citizens.
Well, he had obviously genuine love of Muslims and his people. That was utterly doubt. And I tell you what, another thing that motivated him. He was a lawyer brought up in England, and lawyers in England have a curious habit of believing in justice, and so he didn't want injustice done to his people, and he was going to fight for it.
That's when he joined the Pakistan movement, and his disillusionment came because Muslims had no idea what was going on. And it was only in the 1936 elections, when Congress had all the ministries, that the Muslims then realized that actually there was no place for them in the Congress worldview.
It is one of the saddest elements of our history that the Gandhi-Jinnah partnership didn't last very long. They were both from the Gujarati-speaking background. They both were barristers in London. For a few years, they worked very closely together. Then it didn't click. But absolutely true that there should have been a Gandhi-Jinnah partnership for the subcontinent. So we can't now reverse history. And certainly nobody should think of the crazy idea of removing the boundary. But I think that boundary can become just a notional boundary. A real political boundary, but it should not be a boundary between human hearts.
Do not be overwhelmed by the enormity of God on the ground. You are made of sterling material and are sexual man. Why should you also cross the sea like many others, like our own forefathers? You are a nation whose history is replete with people of wonderful great character and heroism. Live up to your tradition and add to another chapter of glory. All I require of you now is that every one of us whom this message reaches must vow to himself and be prepared that the fight is all if necessary. Building up Pakistan as a bulwark of Islam and as one of the biggest nations whose ideal is peace within and peace
I've never heard so many people. I mean, but they moaning and crying, and thousands, lakhs of people. That was to be expected. That's in Pakistan, both. But anywhere, something like that. Remember that Pakistan had only been going for a year or something, so it was very emotional.
So that's when people moved toward that. They understood what he was saying, what Jinnah was saying. And what he said is actually completely is what Islam is. You know, there is no coercion in religion. You can't force people into religion. And that's what our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, if you in the state of Medina, I mean, the minorities were equal citizens, and faith is something which cannot be forced on human beings. Faith is one of the greatest gifts of the Almighty. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not. Allah only told him to give the message. Whether they believed or not, even it wasn't even in the Prophet's hands. So therefore, when people try and force people into religion, they actually go against Islam.
जजों से जोर जबरदस्ती से फैसले आपने लिखवाए।
चीफ ऑफ आर्मी स्टाफ तशरीफ लाए, पैर कांप रहे थे, पसीने माथे पे थे। फॉरेन मिनिस्टर साहब ने कहा कि खुदा का वास्ता है, अब इसको वापस जाने दें।
Prime Minister, on September 20th, your nemesis, Mohammad Nawaz Sharif, did a kamikaze attack on Pakistan's institutions, the army and the judiciary. Fast forward, the ex-speaker of the parliament, Ayaz Sadiq, sullied the waters and said that Pakistan was forced into giving up Abhinandan, the wing commander. And you've said this, that they are following a foreign agenda. What's the story?
Well, both of them are liars. Nawaz Sharif is a certified liar. He was lying in the assembly during the Panama trials. He lied, purged himself in the court, and in the GIT, the third forum, he gave a completely different, another lie. So, and Ayaz Sadiq is a liar like him, because I know what happened in Pulwama, because we were, and after Balakot, because we know what was going on. So this is an absolute lie.
So what exactly happened?
It was a very simple thing. He used, because he was in an election year, Narendra Modi, he wanted to teach Pakistan a lesson. Pakistan had nothing to do with Pulwama.
साथियों, एक ऐसा देश जो भारत के बंटवारे के बाद अस्तित्व में आया, जिसके यहाँ आतंकवाद को पनाह दी जाती है, जो आज दिवालिया होने की कगार पर खड़ा है, वो आतंक का दूसरा नाम बन चुका है। मैं देश को फिर भरोसा दिलाता हूं, धैर्य रखें, अपने जवानों पर भरोसा रखिए। पुलवामा के गुनहगारों को सजा कैसे दी जाए?
मैं टारगेट ढूंढने की कोशिश कर रहा था। आपके एयरफोर्स ने मुझे गिराया, उसके बाद मुझे अपना जहाज छोड़ना पड़ा था जो टूट गया था।
What is your name?
Wing Commander Abhinandan.
Okay. I hope you have been treated well over here with us.
Yes, I have, and I would like to put this on record. And I will not change my statement if I go back to my country also. The officers of the Pakistani army have looked after me very well. They are thorough gentlemen, starting from the captain who rescued me from the mob and from his soldiers, and thereafter the officers into the unit which I was taken to. Okay. This is what I would expect my army to behave as, and I am very impressed by the Pakistani army.
I hope you like the tea.
The tea is fantastic. Thank you.
और अभिनंदन को इस वक्त वाघा बॉर्डर पर भारत के हवाले किया जा रहा है। जो SOPs हैं उसके तरीक़ेकार के मुताबिक वहाँ पर इंटरनेशनल रेड क्रॉस और अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा के नुमाइंदे भी मौजूद होंगे।
And I kept assuring him, I went on media to say that we have nothing to do with that. It was a Kashmiri boy, radicalized, brutalized by the Indian security forces, who blew himself up. And so we said, we will, anyone, if you can provide us any evidence of involvement of Pakistan, we'll take action. Instead, they bombed us. And I warned them, if you bomb us, we will retaliate. So Pakistan bombed them also, although since there was no loss of life in Pakistan, there was no loss of life in India. Their plane chased us and the plane was shot down. Now, we didn't want war. You know, we never intended. We only said that if you do anything to us, we will retaliate. We retaliated. Their plane came after us, was shot down. We had the pilot. He was a prisoner of war. We were going to give him back. So the whole idea was to give a signal to India and to the rest of the world that Pakistan did not want any escalation.
I really hope, Salman, that just as you and I have been able to talk to each other, that my good friend Imran, as he used to be, will be able to talk to decision makers on this side of the border as well, and that there'll be a receptivity on both sides to what they have to say. Someone like Navjot Sidhu came back from Pakistan, very much, he came to see me, in fact, and we had a good talk after that. He certainly felt there were prospects that could be built upon. But as I said, timing is everything, and unfortunately, as you said as well, timing is everything. Unfortunately, the timing of Pakistan's willingness coincided with an increased period of Indian mistrust, and when India was willing to make a gesture, Pakistan found itself unable to match it. So we need to get both sides in the right frame of mind at the same time, and then perhaps we can really meaningfully talk peace.
I don't believe in wars. I don't believe in confrontation. I believe in discussion, negotiation, arbitration, or a reference to a court of law to settle problems between nations. But if you have conflicts and you try to overcome the conflict through war and killing people, both sides will suffer and the problem will not be resolved. So I feel that both Pakistan and India should hold discussion in order to solve the problem between them.
I think the key really is to be engaged and to talking with people to the degree we can. And I think that would be critically important. One of the things I did while I was in the Senate, this is when both Pakistan and India tested nuclear weapons, and both then had heavy sanctions from the United States on them for the nuclear test. And I carried the amendment to lift the sanctions on both nations so that we could engage. And I think that's one of the key things. And I hope, as the new administration comes in, there's this chance to look at, a more robust engagement with Pakistan in particular.
Well, we have the United Nations, which is the world. Unfortunately, the United Nations is not effective because the Security Council controls the United Nations, so much so that even when there is injustice or massacres or fighting, the United Nations is not able to put a stop to it through negotiations. Well, the people of Kashmir should have their own right to determine their future for themselves.
It was a very sensible thing to do, appreciated by everyone in the world. Various heads of state called me up and they thought Pakistan's response was extremely mature.
The Secretary General is encouraged by the joint statement issued by the militaries of India and Pakistan on their agreement to observing the ceasefire at the line of control in Kashmir and engaging through established mechanisms. He hopes that this positive step will provide an opportunity for further dialogue.
Over the last 75 years, many Pakistanis and Indians have pushed the nuclear neighbors to talk peace, not war. But it remains to be seen if their voices will fall on listening ears. The future of South Asia and our planet depends on compromise and cooperation, not conflict.
It would be absolutely traumatic and heartbreaking if any of my brothers, for example, had to go away, or if among my children they had to part ways in this way and go and live in two countries which were supposedly hostile to each other.
ऊपर से नीचे आते वक्त पैराशूट में मैंने दोनों मुल्क देखे हैं और ऊपर से मुझे दोनों मुल्क में कुछ फ़र्क पता नहीं चला। दोनों एक जैसे ही खूबसूरत हैं और जब मैं नीचे गिरा था तब मुझे पता भी नहीं था कि मैं पाकिस्तान में हूँ या मैं अपने देश भारत में हूँ, क्योंकि दोनों मुल्क एक जैसे ही लगे थे मुझे, सारे लोग भी मुझे एक जैसे ही लगे थे।